Good morning. My name is Scott Redler, Chief Strategic Officer at T3Live.com.
And I'm Chelsea Oliver. Welcome to today's morning call. We have mixed markets around the world again, as it's still not acting so well. Europe is off small, and Asia is pretty lethargic with the yen rising again. Do you think that the higher yen is causing our futures to be lower today?
I just think that it continues and it continues, and that does have an impact on our futures market. I'm not such a huge currency guy, but basically, currencies do drive markets as well. And you would have thought that overseas would have acted a bit better considering our strong close yesterday. And I think even some of the ETFs, for overseas, responded yesterday thinking that, things would be higher. And all of a sudden you had the DAX that was up a little bit. It's now down a little bit. The CAC's not doing anything. The FTSE's off a little bit. So, Europe continues to be, a little bit of a problem spot. You look over at the chart of the EWG, you'll see that, still, broken. This trend was rejected at the 200-day. We did come all the way down here, and you'll see if I go close that the EWG was up, I think, over 1% or so yesterday to fill this gap. And today, the DAX isn't up 1% or so. So we'll see, how this reacts today. The low of yesterday is 24.76. If you go to the FXI, it also responded a little bit to our markets yesterday, but didn't get much traction. I would watch this little spot right here to see if it could hold or not. A move below this would raise some eyebrows. It seems as if this ascending channel has been broken, so you want to see if it stays on the right side of it. It's also below the 200-day. So overseas markets are still below the 200-day, while our markets have been above it for multiple weeks.
S&P futures are down 8 to 10 handles after rallying and closing on highs yesterday. What's some support to keep the active bulls in control?
Well, the active bulls, I think, is what's most important here because, yesterday we would have thought that we could have broken support and we rallied all day, so most guys are probably long overnight for some type of follow-through, and that's me also. I took multiple positions to figure out if we can, get some follow-through because a lot of things acted very well. So the question is, is today's down open a blessing in disguise where you could add to strong positions and hold it and come off lows and close okay and then continue. So there are some levels to watch. You look here at the SPX and you'll see that this 3-day support, which is more intermediate support, is very important. But I would think in order for the bulls, our active bulls, to be able to hold their longs, you're probably not going to want to see it get too much below this 256. So if you want to go to the spiders, we talked a lot about that pivot at 205.20 yesterday. Well, first we held 204 and turned up, above the 200-day, above all the moving averages still, but below the resistance. So in order to be in the game to take this out at some point, I would think that, you go into your 5-minute chart, which is a little easier to see, you would think that this spot holds. So I would say if the bulls could defend this area in the first 30 to 60 minutes, you'll probably see some of the relative strength from yesterday come back in strong areas. If this spot gives way fast, sometimes false moves like this turn into fast moves the other way. So below this 205, it's probably going to be hard for individual stocks to kind of ignore that.
Bios had a big day yesterday. The IBB hit north of your target of 280. Do you think you should have held your options a little longer there?
Very nice. Well, obviously, I sold it a day or so ago, but that's what happens. You gotta book your trades, and I flagged the IBB as going or to be in the game when it took back the 50-day, and that was at 262. It hit 285 yesterday, and I think I was done with that trade around 275. So I missed the easier portion, but maybe next time I'll do it a little bit better. You look here at the chart of the IBB, and look at this move from yesterday. Woo! It showed relative strength in the morning and took off. You go into the daily chart, and you'll see, the reason why I got bullish is for the first time right here, it took out its wedge formation, took back the moving averages, and then gave you that quick move. What I should have done is I should have seen this flag develop, which I went over in the morning call, and just bought the IBBs yesterday when we went above 274. So this is how high we hit, into resistance. This was the spot that we targeted if you look at the recap. But you have the 200-day above. Does it want to get all the way up to the 200-day, which is another $15? But at this point, I think, you got to let it digest kind of like it did the past two sessions. So if it could stay now just above, I would say closer to 278-ish, and hold the majority of yesterday, it could flag again to potentially see that 200-day moving average. This was the place to be yesterday.
Right, and now while we're talking about bios, why don't you show us some of the charts that you listed in your bio the last few sessions?
Yeah, in the note I have different sections with different names, and I've been putting 5 or 6 of them over the course of the past week. And yesterday, a lot of them triggered. Guys on the VTF were having a field day with so many of the names. So let's get to a few of them. So let's go CELG. CELG, look at the size of this, wide range bar yesterday. It's still, in a downtrend, but yesterday, nice big bar, to give you anyone who wanted it, a strong showing. So here's your 200-day, which is around 110. So we'll see, can these names that have been broken get up to the 200-day? So here's yesterday's pivot. I'm not going to get into the 5-minute chart, but look at the 5-minute chart to see where potentially it could hold. I'll do one just to give you an example. I'm not going to do them on all of them. So if you look at CELG, yesterday, this was, I would say where it stalled first. So, if you took it home because it went out strong, I would say look to see if it could hold this 106. And I'm sure if it started getting underneath this 105, that's when active bulls will probably leave it. Okay, if it could hold that area with a little bit of time, perhaps, you get a push above this to the 200-day. So let's go to GILD. GILD was something we also had, on the, what's it called, on the note many times, starting from back here. All right, it took a little time, but now look. So this is, on its way to the 200-day. The 200-day above is around 98, so that would be a spot that could pose some resistance. Then some of the higher beta names that we talked about, JUNO. JUNO cleared its pivot that we had in the note yesterday, and it's already at the 200-day. So, at this point, if it gets through it, here's your next spot on JUNO, if there's going to be some relative strength in the bios. Then you have KITE. KITE, gave you a nice little lower tier trade when it got above this little pivot here. And then we talked about the flag yesterday, and this also has some room to the 200-day, which is right here. So a lot of these things are gravitating towards the 200-day, but they have to trade and trade them, in a way you're comfortable. Lastly, yesterday we talked about AGN and the potential of a really good opportunity to buy it versus low. Well, it opened higher than that and then took out this pivot to get into the gap. And I'm going to look at this today to see if it could, go from red to green and perhaps get another move. And a move above this pivot would be 247.23. It has still more room to go, but if it pushes above it and comes back below it, then I would get away from it. And lastly, VRX. I'm sure you've heard this in the news many, many times. Lots of people, have been stuck with this stock. This stock has been broken for so long. It was broken here, broken there, and then yesterday it finally gave you, a nice wide range bar, on some news that, they could be filing, their 10K or whatever they need to do. And then there was some news in the Wall Street Journal that they got financing. So all in all, nice move yesterday into some resistance. It's gapping up on it. I think there is some room to 39. I have this overnight, so I sold half up too, and then I'll see if I could, get back into it if it shows relative strength to perhaps get to this 39. But this was the price that I listed yesterday in my note, that if it can get above, maybe you could see a move. Well, it got above, and it saw a pretty big move.
The Qs and small caps also acted well yesterday. Do you think you'll look there on today's down open?
Yes, because like yesterday, the spiders were getting hit, and the Qs and the Russells were both acting fine. So we'll see today whether or not that can continue. If they can't, then we all have to be a little bit more careful. If you look here at the Qs, really nice move yesterday. The Qs, never broke the 8-day moving average and are still there. So I would say look at halfway into this bar to see if it holds. So I would like to see maybe the Qs hold 109.76, and if it does, maybe it can continue to show relative strength. I guess I have to go to the 5-minute chart to show you that. So if you want to do like support 1, 2, and 3, so I would say if the Qs are going to be, make it easy to hold, you would think that this 109.80-ish spot holds. If this spot can't hold, anyone who bought into this, for a follow through probably gets stopped out. So 109.80 is your spot there. Let's just go right to the Russell. IWM also had a big move, into the end of the day that it's kind of taken back. So I would like to see, this spot hold on the Russell in order to keep some of this, momentum here. If this does not hold, and you decide to hold it, then really this is more of your intermediate level. So I would say you have this level across the board for active guys. So this is what you want to watch in the first 15, 30 minutes.
There was relative strength in high beta tech yesterday. What are some levels to hold here in Google, Amazon, and Netflix?
Yes, those also in the morning were strong. So we'll see if they try and go green, which would be nice because I think a lot of the traders probably are still in some. So sometimes you get a down open and then, it's not exactly what you want because a lot of times, futures up, stocks are up, you just sell them, makes the morning easy. But when they're down, if you take a little time, you could add to it, and then if it does what you thought it was going to do, you could have more shares. But you got to make sure that the momentum stays. So let's go to Amazon first. Amazon, if you go to the daily chart, looks really good. It looked a little faulty, the other day, but then all of a sudden, boom, took back this level, closed strong. So here is the momentum level that it needs to get above. But short term, like I'm long overnight, you want to see certain levels hold, to continue some support. So I would say, here, the last move that happened in Amazon, kind of happened from right around this 596. So, this is the area that I want to see hold. If 595, 596 holds, maybe then we get a push and it gets above that 603. If this doesn't hold, chances are I'm probably going to be out of it because I don't want to sit in it all the way back down to 586. So 595, 596 is that spot, for Amazon. If you go to back to the daily, and we go to just say Google. This also acted well yesterday. It's been just kind of hanging in there for a while. So see if it could hold like 762, and if it can, maybe it continues to go. And then yesterday, Netflix tried to go, but just stalled. So at this point, it's not acting great, but still above the 8-day. I would say, it's got to hold this 103-ish area in order to continue higher, or you could use yesterday's low. If it were to break the 8-day, I'm sure some momentum would be lost, and then we could see it move all the way back to here. So, watch to see what happens here. If it goes green, then you have this 106.50 for your active pivot.
What are some levels do you think in mega cap names like Apple, IBM, and Microsoft?
Apple, was a little wishy-washy yesterday, but closed strong. So unfortunately, I went out long that. So I'm going to have to see whether or not that could get some, some buyers back in it. It's been acting well. First time we started talking about this was here, and then it held going sideways, and then you had another nice little flag pattern that it took out, and it's still holding well, playing with the 200-day. So at this point, I'd love to see it go green and take out yesterday's highs and continue. If you want to go to the 5-minute chart, like I think you have to turn to a lot of stocks, is where was it before the big run? So this is really, I would say, important support. If 109.80 doesn't hold, I'm probably going to get out of it. If this area holds, chances are, just like the other ones I showed you, maybe it tries to do this again because right now all we're doing is taking back that last 90-minute move that might have been a little fluffy.
Tesla had another strong day yesterday off heavy volume. Elon Musk will also be talking again about reservations. Do you think that this could continue higher?
It's starting to get extended, but sometimes extended, meaning hard to buy, doesn't mean short because people have been shorting this for a while. So today will be interesting because you've had some of these like big moves from like yesterday it was down $2 and went up 9. The other day it was down 8 and went up 6. So today when they come out with their reservations, see how it responds. If the reservations are awesome and it can't go up, then maybe that's your spot to take some profits and maybe even look for a cute short if you can get a borrow. If you look here at the stock, it's had an unbelievable move since this V bottom, which was very, very strong. Here's when I think Citron came out and said negative comments on them, but right here the market said it doesn't matter what Citron says. And then you had your first pullback, and then another buyable spot above this, and now boom, boom. So here is your pivot for today's action. Above this, 267.74, do not be short. If it pushes above it, comes back below it, maybe short versus that pivot, and then see if it can retrace. But ultimately, like I said, I think a few sessions ago, this 275 in Tesla, in my opinion, is not going to be the high of the year. So we'll see how quickly it gets there and what's going to happen. You see a trade like this where you get a big engulfing bar here, because it also looked great there, then another signal to take some off, but we have not seen that yet that has stuck in. Or stuck in a word?
I don't know. What did you say yesterday? We're making up words here.
Yes, we gotta.
We're doing it. We have a lot of movement in individual names. Would you like to show us some of those names that might act well the next few sessions?
Yes, and I actually own a few of them. They're like almost some one-off trades because as the market's broaden out, some things play catch-up. And although like some of the security names have been broken, they kind of look good, and there's a conference coming in at the end of the week. So if you look at this first move in FireEye, it's gone sideways and looks okay again. So today, I'd like to see if some buyers could come back into FireEye, because I am long it, because you had a potential day one. Last time you had a potential day one, you had 4 days. Now you've gone sideways for quite some time here. So if we can get above yesterday's high, I do think that maybe if the market obviously doesn't fall apart, it could see that spot. If you look at CYBR, I'm not in this one, but this looks kind of tight also, where perhaps it could get a move above this spot as long as it continues to hold the 8-day. So above this 43.30, perhaps there's room. Just remember that these names are kind of broken names and have worked their way down, so you don't want to get caught. But they are tight, and maybe there's another move. I'm in SHAK. SHAK, not the best looking chart. You remember this big run to start before the shorts were able to, or the insiders were able to sell. Well, here's the move lower. Recently I got a little just watching it again on this wide range bar. Then it kind of held and went sideways for 2 sessions, and now it seems as if it could continue if the market wants to hold up. For this to continue, it's got to get above 38.90, and then I do think that this gap here could get filled north of 40. Obviously, you could put your stops in around 36. WYNN, Steve WYNN came out with some big news that that Macau's not doing so poorly. I don't think anyone's really in this anymore, but because this met my target. Remember in my note I talked about whether, let's get here, this could take out this spot and be a great trade for 2016. Well, it worked well. And yesterday gave you a bottom tail. So if you bought the dip here because you sold there, you're getting rewarded up. It's up about 5. So now see how it handles this 96 resistance. So those are a few of the one-offs.
Metals are up this morning, continuing their random and erratic trade. They did hold the 50-day yesterday. So what do you think is some resistance here?
Let's take a look. Like you said, every day it seems like it's doing the opposite. But what it's doing on an intermediate basis, it's holding its 50-day after a good start to 2016. So I guess that's somewhat constructive. But if you trade it from day to day, it might be a little tougher. So if you look here at the GLD, you'll see that you had a big move ever since taking this 106 area back and then closing above the 200-day. That put this trend back in action. And then you had a big move to 122, and here the 50-day held. 50-day held again here, and now it's up, a few percentage points. So I would say, first obstacle to get above, to get back towards the highs here of 122 is it's got to get and stay above, just say 118. So this pivot right here is 118.81. So see if it could get to it and actually get above it versus just open up and fail. So if you bought the 50-day, you're getting rewarded today. Congratulations. Until the 50-day breaks, I think you have to be constructive on gold, as you're seeing mixed signals from people all across the board. Some say sell gold, some say buy it, some say don't hit someone in the head with it, whatever. 50 days holding, so it's still in this range, and you'll see what's next.
Do you have any other closing thoughts for us?
I think guys had a good day yesterday, very long, and today we're walking in with the futures down 10, 12 handles. So the question is, are we getting choppy again, where there's no follow through, where you have to take your trades and be a bit more careful overnight? Because we started seeing that in gold, and now maybe we're starting to see that in some of the indices. So for today, look at some of those levels in the 5-minute, where we found support at 230. If that support holds, hopefully we can go green and continue. The spiders, I think, needs to hold around 205, below 205. You're going to see some momentum leave. You did have strength in bios, which are a little extended, and then also in high beta tech, which we'll see if some of those areas hold as well. And if not, you could take a little lump, get out, and figure out what's next. Because on the more intermediate level, that 2042 is really the spot. And just like I've said many times in the last few weeks, you can't get too bearish if this level breaks, and that level really is 2042. But for active guys that might not want to sit all the way down to that, you could use that 2050 to 2054 area in the SPX.
Right, and that's all from us today. Everyone, have a great trading day.